Welcome to another edition of the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. I'm your host and your guide. We're here every Sunday night from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just for your benefit. You can go to our website, thebibleforum.net, and you can access the show live or during the week. If you're there, in the bottom right-hand corner is a screen, and it plays all the segments from the last week, and it does that all week long. Because I know some of you just don't have the commitment to stay here for 2 hours and look at me or listen to me. I understand. You can also call in. You can call the show at 843-732-0249. We can take your calls on the air, online, and discuss these things together. Just keep in mind, if you do that, this is internet, there's a delay. So you got to stop talking for 2 seconds before I can start. I don't even know you've stopped, and you get to start again. Keep that in mind. Gay activists say church leaders, quote, must be made to take homosexuality off the sin list, end of quote. New York Times columnist recently opined that, quote, our debate about religious freedom should include a conversation about freeing religions and religious people from prejudices that they needn't cling to and can indeed jettison, much as they've jettisoned other aspects of their faith's history, rightly bowing to the enlightenments of modernity. I'm wondering what it was that I jettisoned along the way. I really don't know. If you're talking about taking homosexuality out or off of the sin list, there's a Bible version out there called The Message that's already done that. I don't recommend it. But I say all of this by way of introduction because there's a team of lawyers who's acting on behalf of a number of Christian and liberty-focused organizations in this country. And they have told the U.S. Supreme Court that to mandate same-sex marriage is to invite God's judgment. The brief was filed by William J. Olson Law Firm and the U.S. Justice Foundation, and they did it on behalf of Public Advocate of the U.S., Joyce Meyer Ministries, the Lincoln Institute, the Abraham Lincoln Foundation, Institute on the Constitution, Conservative Legal Defense and Education Fund, and Pastor Chuck Baldwin. The court is ready to hear arguments the end of April 2015 in a case coming from the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in which judges said state residents are allowed to define marriage in their state. The appeal contends barring same-sex marriage violates the U.S. Constitution. The stated contention is, quote, should the court require states and the people to ritualize sodomite behavior by government issuance of a state marriage license, it could bring God's judgment on the nation, end of quote. They go on to say, quote, Holy Scripture attests that homosexual behavior and other sexual perversions violate the law of the land, and when the land is defiled, the people have been cast out of their homes, end of quote. The brief is citing Old Testament passages like Leviticus chapter 18, which refers to Sodom and Gomorrah, cities that were not Jewish, cities that were not under Mosaic law, cities that were just cities of the plain, didn't have any connection with God at all, but were nonetheless destroyed because of their gross immorality. And the Bible says their cry, this cry of immorality, had come up, and their sin, God said, was very grievous. Genesis chapter 18. Two Supreme Court Justices Elena Kagan, Ruth Ginsburg have already performed same-sex marriages to people. In one case was part of her staff, and the other was somebody else unrelated. And Ruth Ginsburg has already stated in a public interview when asked the question that she thought society had pretty much embraced it. Tells you kind of where she is and what she's going to do. These two are going to vote for it. And of course, there are folks saying they should recuse themselves, but they won't. The question I had was, what kind of judgment are we really talking about? Is it the total destruction of the nation, people included? That's the biblical story. God brought a fire down like rain upon these cities, 5 of them, because of the gross immorality that was rampant in those cities. But if you read the storyline, you find that the angel of the Lord, which is always a reference of the pre-incarnate Christ, in speaking to Abraham, found himself in a negotiation. Abraham was asking him if there were 50 righteous people in Sodom, would he still destroy it? And he said no. And Abraham, emboldened, said, well, what if there were 40? And God said no. How about 30? No. 20? No. 10? No. I think Abraham stopped too soon. I think if he'd have got down to 1, God would have said no. But he didn't. He got down to 10. You see, his nephew Lot lived in Sodom. He was married. He had 4 daughters. That's 4, 8. It's 10 people. Mom and dad and 4 sets of married couples. Got to be 10 people there. There wasn't. There was 1. And we weren't so sure about him until Peter came along under the inspiration of the Spirit of God later on and said that Lot was righteous. Was it Peter or was it in Jude? But righteous Lot. See, I think this is a message to us about the tribulation, about the rapture. I honestly think God's going to take all believers out of here before he rains down his judgment. And I think the cities of the plain are an illustration of it. As long as there was 1 righteous soul in there, it couldn't be destroyed. How do you know that? Because the angels dragged Lot out. Could have just left them all in there. Nope. 2 angels. Each angel had somebody in tow on both sides. Lot and his wife and the 2 girls. We know the wife, she didn't like the idea. She turned back in longing and was turned to salt. And the girls, they committed incest with their father. Because how are we going to have any children? It's all that. But Lot is classified as a righteous man. If I'm right, I'm thinking that America will remain as long as there is 1 righteous soul still alive in this country. Is there a coming judgment upon America? Like Sodom and Gomorrah? Then the righteous souls would have to leave. If the complainants are thinking about divine judgment in terms of physical destruction, I think they're off base. I don't think God's going to destroy America like he did Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't think God's going to destroy any nation of the earth that way. But there is a judgment of God upon nations and upon people and people groups. And the Bible lays it out. America is where she is today. Still here, still relatively free, still functioning as the nation the other nations of the world want to be like, or at least the people do, because they keep trying to get in here, because of the Christians who reside in her. Had the church remained strong, biblically strong, I don't believe we would be where we are. I think we are at this point in our life politically because the church has let us down. The Bible says righteousness exalteth a nation. What nation? A nation. Theoretically, any nation. This nation embraced biblical righteousness at its founding. Righteousness exalteth a nation. But sin is a reproach to any people group. Proverbs 14, look it up. But the most compelling argument is in the New Testament epistle of Romans, Paul's epistle to the Romans, where he is laying out Christian doctrine. And he begins in chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. He begins to explain why all human beings are under God's judgment. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. What do you mean, not me? Yeah, let me explain it to you. Well, not certainly the Jew. Yeah, let me explain that to you. Gentiles, Jews, they're all guilty. He lays it out in chapter 1, beginning in verse 18. That's not actually where it begins, but that's the first point I want you to see if you have a Bible open or you want to look this up at some other time. In Romans chapter 1, verse 18, he's telling us that the wrath, the judgment of God, is upon all. All. The phrase is all who hold the truth in unrighteousness. That's Old English. It's a little hard to get. But you take it apart and look at what the Greek is actually saying here. And it's talking about small children. Children who know to do right and do the opposite. They know what's right, but they won't do it. Not just small children, old men and women. We all do that. When you knew the right thing to do, when you knew it was right and you should do it, and you deliberately chose not to do it, you were holding the truth in unrighteousness. And God says there's a judgment, a wrath of God upon all who do that. What form does it take? Well, verse 21. The Bible says their foolish heart is darkened. The more you sin against God, the more you sin against God. The more you ignore what you know is right, the more you ignore what you know is right. And a darkened heart is a heart where no light is penetrating. Where the light of the gospel, where the light of God, where the light of truth, all that's right and good and holy doesn't get there. This is not God singling out a people group. This is happening to each individual one at a time. It happens in the normal course of events. And of course, God has it set up to work this way in every heart. The judgment of God will come in every case to every heart. Well, how do you get children to not do the things they know are wrong? Well, initially, you protect them from the wrong. You don't give them wrong. You don't give them the opportunities. And as they get a little bit older, you show them that it's not right to do that. You do it, show it by your behavior. You show it by correcting them. You may show it by a don't touch that kind of a thing. What have we done as a society? We've taken parenting out of the family. We have removed children from parents and parents from children. The nuclear family hardly exists in this country. And even where it does, the value systems are crazy. We have sent moms off to work because we want more stuff. And we've got children in kennels 50, 60 hours a week where some other people get to imprint their value system upon them. And when the family gets back together again, it's not around the table, it's how was your day? It's a hit or miss, fast food, grab a plate, go upstairs, sitting with the thing, got your little iPad and your iPhone, and you're doing I mean, I have seen, you see it on television, you see it in movies, whatever, and they make jokes of it. It's real. 4 people sitting at the supper table, and they're all texting each other. Kids in class talking to the kid behind with a text. I couldn't teach in a public school. I'd have a basket at the door. Put your phone in. Not having it. We're here to learn. We're not here to play games. Values, discipline, structure, gone. We took all that out. And now we want the school to do it. We want the police to do it. And we're upset when they go too harshly. But our laws are still set up. If you do this, you get that. I mean, and that's the way it's supposed to be at home. If that darkened heart doesn't get your attention so that you change, you will continue going down this pathway. And God will begin to move again in your life. Verse 24, it says there comes a point when he turns us over to uncleanness. Turns us over to uncleanness. This is moral uncleanness. He is relaxing his restraint, allowing you to have the very thing that you want, which is to be free to do all of these things, to engage in moral impurities of one sort or another. Not all sexual, moral. And the implication here is that he is protecting us until we push hard enough out of the box. He is restraining the natural evil that is in our heart, that heart that was formed in us, desperately wicked, deceitful above all things. God's guarding that for us, unless we insist otherwise. And if that doesn't impress us, so that our hearts would turn toward God, he relaxes it even more. In verse 28, he says, by refusing to retain God in their knowledge. See how far you've gone? In the beginning, you were just telling a little lie, taking something that didn't belong to you. Then it escalated into something bigger. And now you don't even care about God anymore. And when you get to the place where you don't really care about God, then God, the Bible says, turns you over to a reprobate mind. Reprobate, useless, empty, colorless. That's what God allows you to be. To do those things, he says, that are not becoming, not fit. You see that in this world? You got a television, right? You watch Dancing with the Stars? You watch sitcoms? What do you watch? You watch some of these programs where they used to have what was called double entendres, where they would allude to something. Now they show it to you. You watch them? There's something wrong with your heart. There's something wrong with your heart. The culture is the culture. What are you doing? At this last point, people are acting like animals, just satisfying themselves, whatever that means. Their thinking is reprobate, a reprobate mind. They don't think right. Their values are reprobate. Their goals are reprobate. And unless it pleases me, unless it satisfies me, unless I get something out of it, I'm not having any part of it. I'm going to satiate my desires. God's letting me do that. You say, like what? He gives you a list. Being filled with all unrighteousness, being filled with all fornication, with all wickedness, with all covetousness, with all maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers. Anybody ever tell you that a contract hasn't been written you couldn't get out of? Covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who, knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. They watch it online, on TV, in the movies. Sounds bad, doesn't it? That's where the United States is now. That's where most churchgoers are now. Did you see the phrase, without natural affection? Inventors of evil things. I think we need to wake up. I think God's judgment is already upon us. It's already upon us individually. It's already upon us corporately. There are things being floated on a public political platform, station, thing that don't make any sense at all. 50 years ago, you would be run out of town for ideas like this. And now they're being floated as, yeah, that's the right thing to do. What else can God do to us besides just take away all that we have? He's already turned us over to the base things of our own heart to do whatever we feel like doing. God is no longer restraining evil in the life of these United States. That ended a long time ago. He's not restraining it in terms of our own lives. That happened when we were children. We've moved on. Who is it but a complete imbecile who thinks that cigarettes and alcohol and marijuana and sex as entertainment and a whole bunch of other stuff are just right and good? And it's up to me. It doesn't hurt anybody else, and I want to do it, so I'm going to. Who thinks like that? People cut off from God. People cut off from righteousness, from holiness, from decency, from anything good. People who have sold their souls for a mess of pottage. People who are unwilling and now unable to retain God in their minds. Our country is being led by such people. Nothing in this country makes a lot of sense from a logical standpoint. The economy, our foreign policy, our laws, our values, our morals, our standards, our entertainment choices. Does it seem rational to you? Clearly, this is not a matter of intellect. I'm not the brightest bulb on the street here. I can see it. You can see it. We've got some of the smartest people in the world working on our behalf in every area of life. and that they can't figure this thing out. They can't see it as clearly as you do. That ought to get your attention. There is a judgment coming. The Bible predicts a grand conflagration over Israel that's going to draw the entire world into its vortex in order to destroy it. Close to half the world's population will die in less than 7 years. Do you know what kind of disease that brings? Do you know what kind of disruption that brings to the whole system? Do you know how much chaos is going to reign when this sort of thing is happening wholesale? Almost half, I think it's 40% in a 7-year period. It'd take longer than that to bury these people. They're going to have bulldozers digging holes and just throwing bodies in and covering them up as quick as they can. The Bible talks about the water pollution in rivers and streams and lakes and even the ocean. I think some of that's just because of the death and destruction. And all of that is culminating with the return of the King of Kings. When Israel is completely overrun by her enemies, 2/3 of her population is gone. They will cry out to their Messiah, and he'll come. And he'll put his foot on the Mount of Olives, and it'll break in half. And water from the Mediterranean will run into the Dead Sea. It won't be dead anymore. But he comes with a sword in his mouth. It's the Word of God. And all unbelievers will die at that moment in time. No unbeliever will survive the coming of Christ, not one. And he'll set up an idyllic kingdom, and he'll reign over it for 1,000 years. And during that 1,000 years, children will be born who will go through the same kinds of things that we do. And at the end of that 1,000 years, the devil will be loosed, and he'll find people who are willing to follow him, just like he did in the beginning. Only this time, they're all going to be destroyed in one fell swoop. There's no battle. And the devil's going to be thrown into a bottomless pit. Until then, it's going to be business as usual, meaning things are going to get worse. They're going to get crazier long before it gets better. Is there a coming judgment upon the United States? Yes and no. It's already here.